But when we talk about 30% of all home sales are cash, that's all cash. The entire purchase is cash.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Change and the Market. My name is Peyton Beck, and joining me, as always, is two-time best-selling author, real estate luminary, and CEO of the Masiello Group, Chris Masiello. Chris, how are you today?
Hi, Peyton. Good to be with you.
So, Chris, today we're going to be touching base on something that we've talked a little bit about, but is becoming more and more apparent in recent reports, and that is the influence of millennials in the market as they get older, and what that's really doing to housing prices as we look into 2024 and beyond.
It's a great topic because it's kind of one of those things that silently is really influencing housing. And it's probably influencing more than anything else, even more than interest rates. So you've got baby boomers, you've got millennials, and you've got the Gen X. And those are all of those demographic cohorts. They represent really the bulk of the population of the country, and they're all needing housing all at the same time. And that is what's putting pressure on the housing supply. So people are kind of wondering, right, well, how do we get here? Well, there's two things really. The interest rate thing is kind of a blip, so just put a pin in that, put it to the side. But when you start taking a look at all these demographic groups all needing housing at the same time, we've never seen that before. There might have been a period of time, maybe at the end of the Second World War, where that was an issue, but not to the same extent you have now. So, yeah, I mean, they're all in the market, and they have different needs, right? So if you think about, the millennials and the Gen X group, right? They would be younger consumers, and so they might be looking at their first or second homes, maybe their third. Then you've got the baby boomers. The baby boomer generation is 1946 to 1964, if you were born in that time period. And that group is starting to kind of age out a little bit. And there are a few trends in there where they're deciding, like, do they want to stay in their traditional large home, or are they going to downsize? Some people, because of the lack of inventory, have chosen just to stay in their home, even though it might be a little bit bigger than what they take care of, than what they want to take care of. But they really can't find, what they're looking for. And again, that's all kind of inventory based. And so it is an interesting dynamic, and it kind of hides in plain sight if you think about it that way. And it is what is influencing the market probably the most.
So just to put it in layman's terms, do we feel like when it comes to millennials specifically, is it because they're getting into a place where they're just comfortable, they're in a spot where they like to be, they're not probably going to be, if they have, kids, they're aging, they're waiting for those, for them to get older, so they're not really contributing to the inventory as much, thus kind of being that bottleneck and causing prices to increase?
Well, the millennial age cohort, right, is born 1980 to 1994. And there was a lot of speculation going back maybe 15 years ago, 20 years ago, that the millennials might not necessarily be a house buying demographic. And it was really interesting because a lot of apartment buildings were built because there's just this assumption that it is a more geographic transient group, right, where they move across the country, they change jobs frequently. There are some certain things to it that are kind of unique to that group. But at the end of the day, it was all wrong. I mean, because like they were brought up in houses with backyards, and I'm being very general about it, okay? But why wouldn't they want that for their children? And so some, not all, but some of the energy for housing was put into apartments. I'm talking nationally, okay?
Sure.
But some of the energy was put into apartments because there was a speculation that the millennials, wouldn't necessarily want to be homeowners like their parents were, and that's turned out to be totally wrong. And so there's kind of this misallocation of resources that really has kind of like negatively impacted where we are with housing supply today.
That makes a lot of sense. And actually, I kind of also I put a pin in my head to say that come back to this, but you had mentioned when you were talking about the current state of the market, you said that interest rates were just going to be the blip, right? Like that's not the issue here. That's not what's causing the housing prices in this trend we're talking about. That kind of ties into, I guess, a couple things, right? So a couple weeks ago, we had talked with Laura back from GMC Loans, kind of talked about various things for that can help people who maybe they're currently in the apartment buildings and want to go to the single family home situation or whatever else, but are struggling to kind of get that under their feet, because it's intimidating, and they want to get, taking that first step can be a lot. And one thing they did mention, she mentioned, and I know a lot of states do offer some sort of related program, was the first-time down payment help. I know New Hampshire, for instance, does the 5 to 10K help. They just kind of put it as a lien on that home, and then you can kind of just work from it from there. Do you feel like people are taking advantage of those kind of offerings as much as they should in the current market to help them through this interest rate blip?
Yeah, they are, and of course every state is different. So you have to, so one state will have a program where an adjacent state might not, and so what you really have to do is kind of talk to your loan officer about what's available in my geography for programs. But there are all sorts of programs out there. The whole refinance program, for instance, that CMG has, it gives you 5 years to refinance. It's a really generous program, so you can get your loan today, and then anytime in the next 5 years you want to refinance, it doesn't cost you anything. So there's a lot of creative solutions out there, in part because everybody knows that this is just temporary.
Those solutions I'm sorry, but those solutions that you talked about are just for the first-time homebuyers. I know that's what I was initially hitting on, but that's for everybody across the board, correct?
For everybody. It's for everybody, right? But there's another element to this, though. We've touched on this, I think, many episodes ago. So I'm going to say in round numbers, okay? Might be more or less depending on where you are, but 30% of all the sales in the country are cash. And it's simply because, especially with the baby boomers, it's more advantageous from an estate planning to waterfall their wealth to their children and grandchildren, and they're using it and they're investing it in housing, because housing is such a good investment. And so yes, we have a high interest rate environment. But you have to think about it in terms like this. Only 70% of the buyers are getting mortgages. And that's a big shift, okay? Because you would go back maybe 10 years ago and that number would be 90 or 95%. And so that is a huge difference right now that we're seeing, is that you have that waterfall effect of wealth from the baby boomers down to their children, their grandchildren. And that's another factor of this environment that is very unique.
Are we seeing an increase in HELOCs or cash refinances for individuals who are trying to support, like older individuals who are trying to support their kids to get those initial down payments, whatever else, whether those second mortgages are from, just $20,000, $90,000, whatever that looks like, to help their kids? Is that something that people are leveraging as well, other than just their?
They could be, sure. They could be tapping into their equity. I mean, if just round numbers, right? If you own a house that's $400,000 and you don't have a mortgage on it, it's in essence $400,000. That's a $400,000 debt-free asset.
Sure.
So sure, you could go take a HELOC out on it and float the money as opposed to selling the house. I mean, and I'm sure there's a lot of that going on for down payments. But when we talk about 30% of all home sales are cash, that's all cash. The entire purchase is cash, right? So what you're not getting in that are, to your point, what you're not getting in that 30% number, because this would be over and above that, are what are the percent of sales that are heavy cash, 30, 40% down. That's even a bigger number. And sure, the money could be coming from the equity of an existing home.
Yeah, no, and that was just a thought I had as you were talking of, like, we're talking about these programs and all that good jazz. How are people? I mean, of course, when you're older, you have your assets in line a little bit more than a mere 26-year-old Peyton Beck. But I was just curious. That's really, really good information. Anything else you want to add for viewers today on kind of this topic of what we're talking about, for some encouragement maybe?
I think if you haven't had this conversation at a family level, it's not a bad conversation. Whether you're the parent or the grandparent, or whether you're the child or the grandchild. These pretty good conversations to have, because it used to be, and I think some of this came out of the Depression era, where people held on to their money until they passed. But now there's an entirely different thought process, because for estate planning, and people want to see their family members, right, their children, their grandchildren, enjoy the resources that they have while they're alive. And so if you haven't had that conversation, it's worth having, because it is a very legitimate conversation to have. And we all kind of get, people can get kind of weird about money, and at the same time, though, this is a really smart way to manage family wealth. It's very smart. So if you're in that situation, regardless of where you are, in your family tree, it's worth having, because again, it is a very smart wealth strategy.
And there's benefits on both sides, right? Looping in a financial advisor into that conversation would probably be in your best interest.
Sure, absolutely, yeah.
Well, I think that'll do it today for us on this episode of And the Market. If you've liked this episode, feel free to comment or subscribe on whatever platform, or follow Facebook, YouTube, whichever. And until next time, guys, we hope you guys have a wonderful Thanksgiving, and we'll catch you December 1st.
Great. Good to be with you. Everybody have a great holiday. Thanks.